yet still so profoundly misunderstood. We're talking about depression. But look, we aren't just going to rattle off medical definitions in this explainer. Instead, we're going to walk through what a day in the life actually feels like when you're carrying this invisible weight. By tracing this chronological path, step by step, we're going to get a much clearer, more empathetic look at how this condition literally dismantles daily life. Now, this quote right here, it perfectly hits the nail on the head. It captures the core deception of depression. You see, it's a sneaky, invisible illness. It almost never announces itself with some sudden, dramatic crash. Instead, it creeps up on you. It shifts your behaviors and your mindset so gradually that, well, you often don't even realize you're struggling until you're already completely trapped at the bottom of that hole. So let's start with part one, the invisible illness. Before we zoom into the personal daily experience, we really have to grasp the sheer scale of this. 300 million. Worldwide, across all ages, all demographics, 300 million people are actively battling this mental disorder. And what does that baseline battle actually feel like? It's just a constant, unyielding feeling of hopelessness, total emptiness, and this profound, heavy tiredness. It completely strips away your motivation, it ruins your concentration, and it makes simple decision-making feel like you're trying to move a mountain. And you know, a huge part of that exhaustion comes from how depression absolutely wrecks your sleep cycle, often in polar opposite ways. For some people, their brain just feeds them this relentless anxiety, right? Keeping them up all night with zero rest. For others, they might sleep way too much, and yet they still wake up feeling like they haven't slept a single wink. But in both of those scenarios, the day begins with extreme, debilitating exhaustion before their feet even hit the floor. Which brings us to part two, the physical struggle. Because of that severe sleep disruption, that lack of mental energy instantly translates into physical hurdles. Think about your normal autopilot morning routine. You get out of bed, take a shower, brush your teeth. For someone without depression, you do this without thinking, right? But with depression, these totally basic, mundane habits transform into insurmountable obstacles. Getting out of bed alone, that can take literally every ounce of willpower a person has left. And this leads to a massive societal misunderstanding. When someone's personal hygiene starts to drop, the outside world usually just assumes, oh, they're just being lazy. But the harsh reality? It's entirely different. For someone struggling, just taking a shower, or washing their hair, or putting on clean clothes, it isn't just boring. It is physically exhausting. Sometimes it's genuinely painful. It just completely drains whatever tiny reserve of energy they managed to scrape together for the day. Think of depression like a thief. It steals your motivation and it slowly drains the joy out of your absolute favorite hobbies until they offer zero satisfaction. When you slowly feel dead and numb inside, what's the natural reaction? You just want to retreat. You want to pull the covers up and stay in bed all day because the physical and emotional cost of simply existing is just way too high. Moving on to part three, the cluttered environment. As the day drags on, this internal struggle starts to bleed into the person's physical space. Dirty clothes start piling up. The trash can overflows. Stuff is just scattered everywhere across the floor, making it hard to even walk around the room. See, cleaning requires energy that they fundamentally do not have, so the mess just grows. And here's the really tragic irony of it all. Living in a cluttered, chaotic space makes them feel deeply uncomfortable and even worse about themselves, but they lack the physical capacity to fix it, so it just compounds their daily misery. And this erratic lack of control, it extends right into the kitchen too. Some people will desperately overeat, basically emptying the fridge, trying to physically fill up this emotional void of sadness. Others experience the exact opposite, a total loss of appetite, where just the thought of food makes them feel disgusted. And even if they are hungry, that bone-deep exhaustion we talked about earlier makes the simple idea of making a basic meal feel completely overwhelming. Part 4. Isolation and avoidance. Okay, so we've seen the physical exhaustion and the messy environment, but what is the natural human response to overwhelming situations when your tank is already completely empty? Avoidance. Depression makes people feel devastated and totally out of control, so they ignore problems, just hoping they'll vanish. But just like that overflowing trash we just talked about, ignoring life's problems guarantees they pile up, eventually becoming entirely uncontrollable. There are really three main reasons why this total social isolation kicks in. First off, the mere act of socializing becomes overwhelmingly draining. Second, their brain actively tricks them into believing that everyone is genuinely better off without them. And third, they develop such a deep self-hatred that they absolutely dread interacting with anyone. This isn't just about blowing off a party on a Friday night. People suffering from severe depression might stay locked inside their homes for weeks on end just to avoid human interaction. And finally, part 5, the negative spiral. We've walked through the grueling morning routine, the chaotic environment, and the isolation. To wrap up our daily journey, we have to zoom back inward, straight into the mental prison that keeps them awake late at night. When you're isolated, your mind is your only companion, right? And depression makes that companion hostile. It's a slippery slope of catastrophizing. The brain actively, constantly searches for pessimistic proof. Every time something bad happens, no matter how tiny, the mind grabs it and says, "See, I told you so. Here's your proof that life is terrible." It's just a constant loop of validating their own sadness. And the result of that relentless negative spiral? Overwhelming guilt and completely shattered self-confidence. They develop a terrible self-image, convincing themselves that they're practically worthless. And worse yet, they take on this false guilt. They actually start to believe that every single problem around them, even the stuff totally outside of their control, is entirely their own fault. Which leads us to a really twisted, tragic protective mechanism. Because they feel worthless and because they expect everything to go wrong, they start living in constant fear. If a good opportunity pops up, they reject it. If they find themselves in a great situation, they'll unconsciously, or honestly, sometimes consciously, sabotage it. Why? Because they are absolutely convinced it's going to end badly anyway, and they're just trying to protect themselves from the inevitable disappointment. It literally stops them from living and achieving anything incredible. So we've mapped out how this invisible weight silently dismantles a person's day, from the intense struggle just to wake up, to the way they eat, clean, and think. Our source material leaves us with a really powerful prompt today, and I want to pass this question right on to you. What other behaviors have you noticed? Whether it's in yourself, or maybe in others around you, how else does this invisible weight manifest? Take a second to really think about that. And hey, thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today.